interesting work in and around stoichiometric modeling. So we also like to learn what they're up to and what they're thinking. So hence we have these talks organized throughout the day. I think we have about 10 talks. But I would like to ask all of our speakers to really try to stick to their times such that we get more discussion at the end, because we also like to have a discussion among yourselves as speakers, but also with the audience. Okay? So all of the afternoon is basically left for discussion, and hopefully some of the talks will inspire the discussion as well. But maybe there are also ideas that are already floating out there to be discussed. Okay, so without much ado, I'm gonna get us kicked off. Our first speaker. So I should also say I would like to thank to Kalesh Shidaran, who has organized this with me. And also I would like to thank all the speakers who came just for this from far further away. So Shiri Freilich, actually she's one of the people who came from further away, from Israel. So, and she's going to talk to us about taking a bottom-up approach. I'm going to be showing you cards about time. So each of the speakers have 10 minutes plus 5 minutes for questions. You can eat into your 5 minutes. You're eating into questions. So it's up to you. But I'll give you a 2-minute indication or 5-minute indication. That's when you're 10 minutes up. And then 2 minutes indication. That's when your 13 minutes is up. Okay? All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I took the title to my talk from Sawyer's latest review, and he described these two approaches. He divided approaches in synthetic biology to two, and I think it's applied to the use of stoichiometric models. So we have top-down approaches, which are a model system to ask questions about stability and mainly about performance. And you can use the stoichiometric modeling approach to ask bottom-up questions. And those are exactly the questions we've been asking in the work I'll describe today. First, to use bottom-up approach to try and describe the interaction patterns that we can observe in a community. And then we can ask how those interaction types shape the structure of communities. So those are exactly the questions we've been asking in the work we've done. And what kind of interactions do we see in bacterial community? So what's good about bacterial community? What makes them a really good model to study, to do the use of ecological questions? We can use metabolic model to ask ecological questions in bacterial community, because the interactions between bacteria are to a large extent metabolic. So is this the...
over there on the other
Okay.
corner.
So mainly there are two types of interactions that we were focusing on. Competition, which is metabolic sense, the co-utilization of the same here competition. Yeah, the utilization of the same resources, the same environmental resources by different bacteria. And we have cooperation, which is actually, those are in metabolic terms, they are cross-chain. They can be commensal, where one species produced from a given metabolite, its product serves the following member of the degradation chain. And sometimes it has a plus effect, as taking the output metabolites, this metabolite might inhibit the production of the synthesis process of the first degrader. So cooperation, competition in metabolic communities, they have a metabolic sense, and that hence can be modeled. So we now have a lot of metagenomic data, a lot of sequencing data. In the project I described, we were using 16S data coming from 3,000 samples. And this is chevron data, and the samples are also annotated. We have higher level hierarchy of annotation. Samples are coming from water, from gut, from soil, and some other sample types. And what we've done is to construct a pairwise co-occurrence matrix and to look for ecologically co-occurring pairs. And the next step, first we looked at the sample type level, but we also look at the level of the sample itself. So we're looking for not only bacteria that inhabit similar sample types, but also the actual samples. And this also allows us to look for mutual exclusive pairs, which means, do we find pairs of bacteria species that inhibit the same sample type? Those are, for example, gut bacteria, but are never to be found within the same sample itself. So if we found that they are significantly mutual exclusive, they are defined as as mutual exclusive. And those are the types of ecological interactions we defined based off the data. And the next question was to see how those co-occurrence type relate to the interactions we predict. So we took a very, I think, simple assumption. If we grow bacterial species A in the system, we have a growth prediction. I'll use a term, the flux might say that we might have a quantitative estimation of the production rate of the biomass reaction. And for example, if we grow species A in a given environment, we'll get the growth rate, and I don't want to go into the flux 5. And if we'll grow individually species B in the same environment, we can get the flux of 10. So what will happen if we'll grow the two species together in the same environment? There are three possibilities. It's similar to genetic interactions. We might get 15. There's no interaction, there's no overlap between the species. We might have a growth which is smaller than 15, which means that there is a competitive and negative interaction between the two species, and there might be a growth of which is bigger than 15, which imply a positive cooperative interaction. So this was this basic assumption, and we wanted to see how the species will co-interact. And what we've done is to use the SEED model. The SEED published a set of, the time it was about 100, now I think it's even a few thousand. And what's nice about those models is that that they are that they are built in the same way, so you can co-build models without any further modifications. And what we got is to build the 100. It's about 7,000 unique pairwise system. And I really like this slide because it doesn't show anything, and I get to remember the feeling I got when it was a lot of work to download, to build a pairwise model and so on. And then we got this result that actually shows nothing. And the only interpretation is that there is no sense of looking at pairwise systems if you don't know on which environment you're looking at. So the basic question when you build your system and you want to model the interaction is you have to define the environment. And what we know from past experiments is that different environment induce different interactions. This is example of winter mutants that you can see. This is experiment evidence supported by stoichiometric modeling, and you can see that two mutants of E. coli that do not interact in rich media, in a poor media, we see a synergic growth. So that was our basic approach for inducing different interaction types. From all those 7,000 pairwise systems, we took one that we simulate. This is a real defined laboratory media, and we had two species that show neutral interactions. This means this 15 growths. We predicted neutral interaction. In the laboratory, we've seen neutral interaction, exactly this 15 term. Together, they grew up exactly the sum of their individual growths. And then we started from this defined media and designed a reduced media. We made a poor environment, and we made this is based on Wintermute approach, and vice versa. We induced in competitive interaction by making an enriched media, and it really worked. At the laboratory, we've seen really a very parallel type of co-growth between the two species, between the predicted and observed. And based on those assumptions, we designed 7,000 set of minimal optimal media and minimal media, which I will not go into the exact design of the media, but they should support competitive and cooperative interaction. And what's nice about this score is that those two scores are independent. So it's not on the same scale. You have a scale for competition, you have a scale of cooperation, and you can see that we reach competition at immediate competition level. This is a peak of cooperative interactions. But let's go back to the ecology. So we predicted interaction. How does it look in natural occurring community? So first, ecologically associated pair interact more, both cooperative and competitive interactions. Second, what we've seen is that most cooperative interactions are actually directional. It's actually a give-take, so it's more a commensal type of interaction where we have a beneficiary and a giver. And that actually corresponds with what we see in many ecological samples. For example, the most dominant contributor, the most dominant giver in the data was Clostridia, which is a primary degrader in many natural occurring communities. So then we ask, can we see any benefit from those commensal interaction, from those 1-0 interaction? And what we've done is to build a network of give-take events. And within this network of give-net event, which is based on our simulation, we identified close cooperative loops. That means that indirectly, each member of this group benefits. And we were looking at the frequency of those close cooperative loop in true samples and in random samples designed according to reflect exactly the same network parameters. And we see that in natural community, cooperative interactions are 20 times more frequent than what we see in random samples. And that means that in natural community, comparative interactions are likely to be indirectly beneficial to all parties involved. And finally, we looked at the frequency of such cooperative loops in populations of growing size and which contain true ecologically co-occurring and random species. And we see that in the populations that are designed based on ecological knowledge, we see significantly more ecologically, we see a lot more such close cooperative loops. And that means that the increased tendency of ecologically associated species to form close cooperative loop may suggest an explanation to the observed rise in the total number of bacteria when species diversity increases. And finally, if those loops are so important for community structures, if indeed they have community value, your position in such community loop and such give-take loop might cause competition. So for example, this example is based on a true study, on experimental evidence. We found, for example, we looked at the position of in those close cooperative loop, and we found that those two species which have analog loop position have a suppressive interaction. So for each species, we look at the identity of its parents in such give-take loop, and we looked at how similar are the parental vector in ecologically associated and unassociated pairs. And what we found is that in this group of mutually exclusive pair, we see the higher similarity in the loop position between mutually exclusive pairs, which indicates that there is an ecological competition on your position in those community networks. And and this is just to show that such a metabolic model can be used to study which conditions are necessary to generate interaction pattern between bacterial species, and can teach us about how higher order community can emerge from those interaction type. And the work was done together with Eitan Rupin in Tel Aviv University, Rafi and Omer as part of my postdoc in Tel Aviv University. And that's it.
So we can take one or two questions while Daniel gets set up. Bobby?
Shiri, you mentioned that most interactions you observe are unidirectional or most cooperations.
Yeah.
But in a flux balance model, I mean, the mutual interactions might in many cases be relaxing of inhibition in some form or the other, like centropees are.
Yeah.
So in a flux balance model, we don't model inhibition.
It's true, we will not see it. This is true, we cannot distinguish in this way. We can only identify cross-feeding change, which with the product is one. This is true, we cannot identify inhibition chains. And yeah, it's true, I cannot distinguish between this pattern. I mean, I cannot distinguish between give-take or whether there's some inhibition effect in the approach I was taking. Because we were even not looking at the exact fluxes, we were only looking at the sum of rows.
Any more questions?
Right. Hi, very interesting talk. I was just wondering, how sensitive is your method to the accuracy of models? Because now you sort of generated them all in C. Did you do any post-curation, or did you just believe it?
Well, it's very true. I mean, our initial approach was that we're sacrificing accuracy. This is definitely not the way to use if you want to model a bioremediation community, or if you want to produce a synthetic community. This is definitely not the approach. So we knew we sacrifice accuracy in favor of taking a bottom-up approach. But we were also looking at non-syntropic association and non-cross-feeding. And I mean, I didn't show it here, but we've simulated some known systems, and we got. I mean, the results, they were not perfect. I mean, it wasn't the same right, but they made sense, and it was in correspondence to real ecological system, looking at exact system that we know.
One last question, maybe.
I guess more of a technical question. So when the two organisms are sort of competing for the same resources, how did you decide on something like uptake rates?
Okay.
Was it just fixed the same across all species, or?
It's the same uptake rate for the same species. The logic behind our approach was that we cannot predict in a competitive system who will win. This depends on the uptake rate. What we predict is whether there's an interference, whether they compete for the same. I think for predicting who will actually win the competition, who can cope better with the condition, you have to use dynamic approach. But we only looked whether there is a competition.
All right, let's thank Shiri again.